Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to jimmydore.com.
Well, I got to tell you, the reason that I wrote this book is because I interacted with somebody. There was somebody I came across, and they had worked with Kamala Harris's father, Donald Harris. And they told me about that. And so I started doing research because, you remember when Barack Obama was running for president? We learned everything there was to know about, his mother, Ann Dunham, his father from Kenya, his grandparents, and everything, Jeremiah Wright, and the school in Indonesia. But no one knows anything about Kamala Harris. Nothing. I mean, we know nothing. We know that she was in Congress. She gave some great speeches, and now she's potentially the next president. We know nothing about her. Well, her father is Donald Harris, who is a Marxist economist who taught at Stanford University. He was an advisor to the government of Michael Manley, the kind of socialist president of Jamaica, kind of a Bernie Sanders president of Jamaica for a long time. And he and her are not on speaking terms. He denounced her presidential campaign in 2020. And there's a story there. There's a lot there. And no one wants to talk about it. I dug into it and did the research.
And why did he? Now, it had something to do with her disparaging Jamaicans as pot-smoking potheads, right?
Well, yes. So what happened was she was on a radio show called The Breakfast Club. And she was asked if she'd ever smoked marijuana. I don't know if you remember this. And she said, oh, yeah, that she smoked weed when she was in college. And then they asked her what music she listened to when she smoked weed. And she said Snoop Dogg. And that was interesting because Snoop Dogg had not yet released an album at the point when she was in college. So that's interesting. But regardless, she then said, half my family's from Jamaica. What do you think? And Donald Harris heard about this, and he didn't particularly care for it. And he published an essay called Reflections of a Jamaican Father. And in that essay, he reveals that it looks an awful lot like Kamala Harris lied in her autobiography. In her autobiography, The Truths We Hold, she says that when her parents divorced when she was a small child, the only thing they fought over was the books. Oh, doesn't that sound nice? They only fought over the books. Well, Donald Harris reveals they actually fought over who got custody of Kamala and her sister. There was a custody battle. And in that custody battle, they played up the stereotype of Jamaican men and black men as not good fathers, as pot smokers, as lazy, etc. And that stereotype that she invoked of Jamaicans as, joy-seeking, I forget the language he exactly used, but, that was used to deprive him of the ability to see his daughters. So he particularly took issue from it. He denounced her presidential campaign. He called it a travesty of identity politics, and he said he speaks for her entire Jamaican family. He did not attend her inauguration as vice president. Her mother is deceased, and Kamala Harris talks about her mother endlessly. Her mother is like a saint. But her father, nobody talks about the fact that she has this father who taught Marxist economics at Stanford University, etc. And there's a lot there if you dig into it. That is particularly surprising. If Barack Obama had a Marxist father, we would have heard about it endlessly. But nobody wants to talk about Kamala Harris and her estrangement from her father in Jamaica.
The thing is, we talked about this yesterday or the other day. It would be a mistake for Trump to come at her as being some kind of far left Marxist radical, because she's not. She's not. She is a very much an authoritarian enemy of black people, lock 'em up cop, and a tool of the military-industrial complex and Wall Street, along with Big Pharma. So she is a corporate puppet. She's all the bad things you would think of. I used to equate with being right wing, but now things are flipping around. So I don't know, those terms don't mean anything anymore. So, but yeah, she's not a far leftist. Ed, would you consider her a far left? You wrote the book.
No, not at all. I mean, what is interesting, though, is that, her parents certainly were on the far left when they met each other.
Right.
They met each other at the free speech movement in Berkeley. They were part of, left-wing protests. They were most likely in some kind of communist organization at that time. We don't know exactly, but her father was a Marxist economist. They were both attending protests. But what's interesting, and I talk about this in the first chapter of the book, is that, Berkeley in the early 60s was not only the center of, protest movements for civil rights, the free speech movement at UC Berkeley. It was also the center of all kinds of CIA programs intended to manipulate left-wing politics. Starting with the downfall of McCarthy in the late 50s and early 60s, the U.S. government started covertly funding various leftist and communist groups while manipulating and crafting their politics to serve a different agenda. The Bay Area was the center of Project MKUltra, where the CIA was distributing LSD, throughout civilian areas, just handing acid to people, etc. And there was all kinds of manipulation of the politics of the Bay Area. And her parents were heavily involved in that. And that is particularly interesting when you look into it. Kamala Harris talks about how when she grew up in the Bay Area, she attended a cultural center called Rainbow Sign. And it was a cultural center connected with James Baldwin and I believe Ralph Ellison and some other black intellectuals who were being promoted by the CIA as an alternative to the communist wing of black liberation. This was the time when you had the Black Panthers that were rising, Huey Newton in Oakland and others. And so this was a cultural center that was being funded and promoted to kind of push black radicals in a direction that was less dangerous to the establishment. And that's particularly interesting when you look into it. There's a lot there if you look into Kamala Harris and her background, and the fact that no one wants to talk about her father. And when it really gets down to it, the fact that the most epic political knockout was delivered in 2020 by Tulsi Gabbard. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
We played
why
on...
did
I was there when that happened.
Yeah, it was amazing. I've never seen, she just used her very limited time on the debate stage to just go over Kamala's record as a vicious prosecutor.
Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets and make sure you go to jimmydore.com.